protection and under their instructions. They have a position of authority over them, and as such they are imams in that respect. So what is spoken of in terms of justice in the imamate or in the leadership, then it applies to them also. The other area was that of the one whose heart is attached to the mosque. One may say, obviously, women are not obliged to stick to the masjids in the sense that they're there all the time. Compulsory prayers are not required of them. We know that. It is required of men. Some people may question this. Why? Why are men obliged to pray in the mosques and women are not? I mean, is this some kind of division, favoring the men over the women or what? Well, going to the mosque is not necessarily a favor, it's an obligation. For most people it is something which they have to struggle with to get there. So it's not an advantage in that sense. If women are given the easy way in the sense that they're not required to go to the mosque. But really what it is that it has to do with the roles of males and females in society. That males, from the Islamic perspective, they're the ones who function outside the home, gathering what is necessary of the dunya to provide for the home. Their job is to protect that home. So they go out, they get the necessary food and necessary things, whatever, protect it militarily or whatever, from harm. That's their responsibility. So they're out. The mosque is outside. So since they're out, they should pray together, to maintain community bonds in congregation. Whereas women, their main role is in the home. So since the main role is in the home, to make it obligatory for them to go to the mosque, it would create difficulties for them. They're the ones making the food, looking after the children, etc., etc. If it were obligatory for them to go to the mosque for all the prayers, then it would create a strain on them. So this is why an allowance is given to them. They do not have to go to the mosques. However, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, do not prevent your women from going to the mosques. And it's a very important hadith. Hadith found in Bukhari and Muslim. Very strong hadith. Do not prevent your women from going to the mosques. Though their homes may be better for them, but do not prevent them from going to the mosques. And it's unfortunate today in some places like India and Pakistan and some countries, Sri Lanka, Mauritius and other countries, we find women are banned from the mosques. And this has become a tradition that the mosques don't have any places for women. If a woman tries to come in, people will stand at the door and bar them from entering into the masjids. This is out of ignorance, because it's not a part of Islamic teachings at all. Islam teaches that the women should go to the mosques if they wish to. Men should not stop them from doing so. And it was the practice of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, that they used to go regularly to the mosques for Fajr, the early morning prayer, and Isha, the night prayers. They used to do that regularly. Whereas the other prayers, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, they used to pray at home, especially Dhuhr and Asr. So the point is that for a woman, she is required, what's required of her is to pray in the home. If she wishes to go and pray outside the home, she can. But basically it's in the home. So now if a woman in her home sets aside a place, a musalla, where she will regularly make her prayers, then her heart can also become attached to that masjid, a place of sujood, which we call a musalla, a place of prayer. Her heart can be attached, as a man's heart is attached to the mosque, that she regularly goes and makes her prayers there, she worships Allah, she remembers Allah, etc. So we can find that even in the issue of the attachment of the hearts to the mosques, that it does include women. So each of these categories has relevance to both males and females. The next point, which is worth noting, is that the number 7 is not of major significance, though the hadith does begin like this: سَبْعَةٌ يُذِلُّهُمُ اللَّهُ يَوْمَ لَا ظِلَّ إِلَّا ظِلُّهُ. 7 groups will be shaded by Allah on the day when there will be no shade. It's specifically mentioned 7. However, there are other narrations. For example, one found in Sahih Muslim and narrated by Abu Bashir. He quoted Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as saying, whoever gives time to a debtor in difficulty or excuses his debt, Allah will shade him in his shade on the day when there will be no shade except his. That's in Sahih Muslim. So here's another two groups of people. One who gives a person who owes him money time. Time has run out. They were supposed to have paid up. They're not able. Give them time. It's okay. Take your time. Or a person who writes off the debt. That's a higher level. Says, okay, don't worry about it. I'll get my reward with Allah. Both of these people, Prophet Muhammad said, will also be under the shade of the throne. And these were not included in the 7 that are mentioned in the main hadith that we are looking at. And there are others, scholars like Ibn Hajar, he gathered another 10 cases, in authentic narrations, and where the issue of being shaded by Allah's throne is mentioned. There's even a scholar by the name of Al-Hafidh As-Sakhawi who wrote in a chapter of his book Irshad As-Sari, in which he collected 85 other cases. However, it should be noted that the vast majority of the cases he mentioned were based on narrations which were not really authentic. The collection of Ibn Hajar, of those additional 10 cases, this is an authentic collection, and he put them in some lines of poetry. So, the number 7 is not significant. Now, some people try to see in it symbolism, because there are so many things that are mentioned in sevens. We find Allah creating the heavens and the earth, 7 heavens and 7 earths. We find the circumambulation of the Kaaba, the tawaf, 7 times between Safa and Marwa, 7 times. The 7 days in the week. We find that the takbirs of Eid, in the first rak'ah, we make 7 takbirs. Prophet ﷺ said, instruct your children to pray at the age of 7. And when a child reaches the age of 7, if the parents are divorced, he now has the right to choose which parent he will live with, or she will live with. And so on and so forth. There are many other references to 7, even the reference to the oft-repeated verses of the Quran, the Fatiha, the 7 verses. And the Quran was revealed in 7 modes, or 7 dialects. And prostration is done on 7 limbs, 7 parts of the body. The Mahdi will rule the earth for some 7 years. And so on and so forth. There are no end of deeds where the number 7 has been mentioned. However, there is no special symbolism in 7. And we should avoid trying to put into it meaning beyond what it obviously refers to. So when the Prophet ﷺ said, there are 7 who will be shaded, he didn't mean there were only 7, but here are 7 who will be shaded. There are others. Anyway, our hadith addresses the issue of the 7, and those are the ones we'll be looking at. Now, the hadith, after mentioning that there are 7 who will be shaded by Allah in His shade, fi dhilli. What do we understand from this shade of Allah? Some people denied that Allah has a shade. They said, no. To say Allah has a shade is to make Him like a human being, a thing of His creation. Light shines on one side, above, behind, or whatever, and a shade, a shadow is created, and people in the shadow are shaded. So we said we cannot attribute this to Allah. Well, that is true. We don't want to make Allah like His creation. However, if the Prophet ﷺ said people will be shaded in Allah's shade, we don't have the right to say Allah doesn't have a shade. Anyway, this topic is one which we need to look at in a bit more detail, because it relates to the attributes of Allah, which we need to understand as Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught them, and as his companions, Ridwanullahi alayhim, understood them. But we will continue with our look into the attributes of Allah with regards to his shade. And we thank you for being with us in this segment of the program, Those in the Shade of Allah. And we hope that you will continue to follow our program throughout the rest of the season. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.